So here we are, we're in a really nice gap in the forest here. The gap is about the diameter of the height of the trees in the surrounding forest. And the reason why these gaps are really important for regeneration is that we have created the light conditions and we've changed the environment so that anything that's growing on the forest floor can basically make a success of it. So if we were out in the wider forest, it's far too dark there for most tree seedlings to survive and grow. So creating the gap is a really very important way of trying to ensure that we're getting regeneration. But the problem here is that although we've got this really nice oak seedling here, and it would be great if this was able to grow on to maturity, and there's a heavily browsed birch seedling here as well. There's another very small birch seedling here as well. So although forest management has created the conditions for success, the pure browsing pressure will constantly keep these seedlings, as we've seen with other bits of holly and things like that in this gap, that will keep these seedlings very, very small, and eventually they may die if that happens over many, many years. So we really need to change the dynamics of that. We've created the environmental conditions whereby the seedlings can grow, and we could put a tree shelter over this natural regeneration to help it grow and survive. Or if we wanted more oak, because there isn't really very much oak around here, we could actually plant the trees and put a tree shelter on, which will stop the negative effects of the deer. Okay, we've moved now into really quite a dark area of the forest, but we're taking advantage of the fact that on my right there's a tree fall, and tree falls are really useful in woodland because they expose the sort of soil, and soil conditions are really, really important in woodlands to understand them because they drive species composition. And you know, if you've got very wet soils, you'll get certain types of species. If you've got a pH which is near to neutral, you'll get other types of species. If you've got very acidic conditions, you will have other types of tree species. So if you look at the soil that we've got here on the root plate of the tree that's fallen over, you can see that you have a really nice mineral soil. It's freely draining, and this is really good conditions for growing trees. So there are no problems here in terms of the sorts of species that we can grow. We have a nice benign environment. It's warm in the summer and reasonably wet throughout the year. So it's really good conditions here for growing trees. And what we're going to do now is, this is a very dark area of the woodland, and we are literally going to move 25 meters to my left and look at what the forest environment looks like very, very close to where we are. The first thing to look at is how has the environment changed compared with 25 meters away in the dark forest. And you can see there's been a dramatic change in the vegetation. We've got bracken here, and we've also got soft grasses as well. So none of those things existed under the canopy of the surrounding woodland. So we've got an immediate change in the conditions in this group. And if we wanted to regenerate this gap, we've almost lost the opportunity to do that naturally, because just because you create a gap thinking that you're going to get some nice tree regeneration, we're actually changing the conditions in the gap to favour plant species generally, not just the trees that we want. And of course, the grasses and bracken have taken very quick advantage of that. So if we wanted to regenerate this gap, really the only way that we could do that quite quickly and successfully would be to plant trees, once again in tree shelters or in a small fenced enclosure to stop the deer affecting them. But the other thing that we'd need to do is in some way to control the competing bracken and soft grasses. So it's really important when you're looking at your woodland to look at gaps, any gaps that you can find in your woodland, and to see what happens when a gap has been created. And you need to take advantage of that in your management plan because as you can see here, we've created really great conditions for tree regeneration, but there isn't any. So we need to do something about that. And planting is often the best way forward.